Hey everyone, I'm Abhijit. I'm a mechanical engineer and also um, I guess like a person who does AI for physics. So I went to grad school at Stanford and I did my like undergrad at BITS Hyderabad for between 2019 and 2023. I was also in like mechanical engineering. I've basically worked as a researcher at Harvard, at Stanford, and I've also like done a bunch of like physics informed models at Intel. So that's me.
Hello everyone, this is Manas Patil, a second year MSc Biological Sciences student at BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus.
Hello everyone, I am Arushi. I am a second year BPharm student at BITS.
Hello everyone, I'm Marine Raj. I'm a recent graduate of Mechanical Engineering in Hyderabad from 20 batch, and I'll be pursuing my master's.
So, welcome to the interview, Abhijit. My first question for you is: were you interested in research before you joined BITS, and like what motivated you to choose mechanical engineering?
Yeah, so that's a great question. To answer that, we should like probably go back to like when I like before I joined BITS. So actually, like I joined VIT before I actually came to BITS. I took a gap year. And in that gap year, basically with like everyone else, I just you know I wanted to do engineering since I was like a kid. When I was maybe around like 8 or something, I took part in this like robotics thing on like which my mom put me in, and that robotics thing basically was a kind of you build just basically like build robots and you like check out how they work and stuff. But it was like something super simple with just like Arduinos and stuff like that. But essentially, like during my gap year, what I did was I had like this project which I started with like other people, like all over the world, and also my best friend from high school at the time. So we were basically, it was like something very silly. We were like trying to like design Spider-Man's web shooters, and the way we are doing this is there's like a bunch of different chemicals when mixed together that like form, like solid like actual gels, which can be used like it's essentially the same thing as like what Spider-Man does, right? Like where you have like a bunch of liquids which mix together and then they form gels. And that made me think like, oh, I might be like interested in chemistry or something, and it made me think like I might want to do this. And like when I was doing that sort of like project, it had like a lot of interest from like a bunch of research labs and a bunch of like people who want to like help me out, but at the same time it was also like me reading like a lot of papers and seeing like like what can this like actually solve the problem, or like does this actually like seem like something that would work. And my that was like basically my first experience with research, like starting a project on my own and like seeing what the actual scientific process was. And I was like interacting with like a lot of people who were like doing research at like real labs in polymers and gels, and what they were doing was it seemed like really fun, and that's kind of like what sparked this interest in me. And to answer your question about mechanical engineering, so I was like always into CS, like I was super into like computer science and stuff, but I was also like always into physics, right? And it seemed like the part of physics which I liked most was like mechanics, and also like just like dynamics and stuff like that. So while I was like somewhat interested in electrostatics, it was not exactly my thing in like high school. So I basically based my entire like decision on doing like mechanical engineering off of that. So yeah, yeah, exactly. So all we basically did is like me and my best friend thought we should like make Spider-Man's web shooters, and we posted on Reddit saying that we had this crazy idea of like making this thing, and we posted it on like Reddit, and then we created a Discord server, and like a bunch of people joined. There was like this guy who worked at like Lockheed Martin or something, and yeah, exactly. And he was like, this can have like a lot of military applications and stuff. But yeah, that's basically how it started. Yeah, so we had we had like a bunch of chemical tests that we were doing. And the concrete thing which we made like was, basically like testing these chemicals and seeing like what made the strongest sort of like filaments. And like if you think about spider silk, right? What happens with spider silk is you have like a core which is like really soft, and then like the surrounding material around the core is like really like crystalline. So we essentially wanted something which would make that, and the way you do that is by pumping something in the middle, and also like pumping things in radially. Like which when mixed together like create like a solid surface. So we had like some, like some success doing that, but at the same time, like I still had like write my JEE exam again, since I was taking a gap year. So the project just like petered out a little bit, and then I didn't like take it up again because I found more interesting things to do at bits.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, so you mentioned that you took a gap year after your 12th, right? So, like, how
Mhm.
was your experience in it? Why did you take a gap year?
Yeah. So the thing is, I joined VAT on like the first day, and the first class I took, I was, not impressed at all. There's like maybe like the number of people VAT takes is like around 20,000 or something, and I felt like, I was just like one off a million rather than being one in a million. So I wasn't really happy about that. I basically just like asked my father to take me home, and then like I said I'm not going here anymore. So like the experience I gap year, like traditionally, like if you take gap year, you're pretty much like supposed to spend all your time studying and stuff. But I do not like doing things traditionally, and I like taking risks a little bit. So I also like wanted to like explore like whether even engineering was like the right thing for me. But I still like studied a lot every single day. Like there's like 24 hours in a day, so I still study a lot. But effectively, like I was just like exploring to see like what else was available to me and like what actually interested me. And I feel like the gap year was like really useful in like because with the 2 years that you spend preparing for JE, you kind of like don't get the time to like think about like what exactly interests you and like what exactly would be something that you would be happy doing for like the rest of your life. Uh, that's like way too much expectations put on an 18-year-old. So yeah, I feel like the gap year was like really useful for me in like discovering like what exactly interested me.
Okay, but when you take a gap year, Vijay, there's a
Mhm.
lot of societal pressure which a person needs to deal with. Like,
True, true. Yeah.
yeah. So, like, how did you deal with it, and what was your mindset behind the same?
Yeah, so the thing is, I've never been someone who like really cares too much about societal pressure. So there is obviously like a lot of societal pressure and stuff, but like my parents were like really supportive. And they're like wonderful people who never like they initially like have some complaint about like what I do, and they like wonder about like what I can do and stuff. But my parents are like excellent people who always give me like a lot of freedom and always like shield me from like any harsh criticism, and they've always been like super supportive. So I feel like that has been my real superpower, like getting to know like getting like no actual criticism which reaches me.
Oh wow,
And
that's hmm.
yeah, I wasn't really afraid of like disappointing them because I know like whatever I did, they'd still be like very happy for me. And they still are like very trusting in every single thing I do today. So yeah.
That's pretty great. I mean, even I feel that having supportive parents is boon in the in the first place.
Mhm.
So going forward, at this time before joining BITS, had you identified or were you aware of any topics in mechanical that would allow you to explore? Like, would mechanical allow you to explore much?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Before, like I said before, right? Like when I was in third grade or something, I did like this robotics like class, and that interested me in like all three things at once, like all the three engineering disciplines, like which you have, which are electrical, mechanical, and like CS. So I was looking for something which is like interdisciplinary that way. And I figured that like the electronics and like robot are like not like they didn't appear like super complex to me. Like it felt like something I could learn, and it was the same thing for like CS as well. So I was interested in robotics, and that's basically like why I picked mechanical engineering. I
That's
guess
pretty
like
great.
one other thing to mention on top of that is like I'm a huge fan of like like planes and stuff like that as well. And that kind of like made me think, oh, maybe I can like build planes or something. So yeah.
Okay. So, before this, you mentioned that you were like really interested in physics, and now, as we know that you are actually doing a AI-based physics startup. So,
Hmm.
what my question is for the same is that why didn't you, pursue MSc in physics like a dual major rather than, pursuing mechanical in the first place?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I personally did not you know like physics as physics. I like the more engineering aspects of physics, like which could actually be used to like build stuff. And my impression was of the dual degree program was that it was like a lot more rigorous, and I had to like pick like another engineering degree along with that. And I felt like mechanical engineering was like the kind of applied physics that I wanted to do than just like just standard physics, which has like a lot of like quantum mechanics and stuff like that, which I did not really feel was like the best thing. Like it was basically just like mechanics that I was interested in, and not like the other parts of physics, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's a great perspective for that. Now, Abhijit, we all know that tech clubs offer a extensive community of people in the same field. This community, work on projects, discuss career aspirations, and also have seniors guiding the students. So, were you part of a tech club in your college days?
Yeah, so I was part of like both ARC and sets in my first year, and then I just focused on sets after that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what were the things because of which you left ARC, or what did SEDS had that unique thing which made you stick to it?
Yeah, so that's a good question again. Again, it's a matter of priorities, right? And I was like super into clubs in my first year. Like my GPA was like basically, like 7.62, and that was mostly because I spent all of my free time like doing stuff for clubs instead of like doing like what I did in my second, third, and fourth years, which was mostly just studying and like doing research. But essentially like both ARC and sets were like really fun, right? Like they were like really fun clubs to be part of. I have like a bunch of great seniors from both clubs who I really, like appreciate the advice of, and who I really like felt were giving me like, they're basically like exposing me to like what is possible with like mechanical engineering and stuff. But at the same time, like there's only so much time in a day that you can like spend towards things, and I had to like pick between either fluid mechanics or robotics for my research, and there's not like a lot of like I discovered that when I actually took part in like this Flipkart grid competition with ARC, and for that I was doing like CFD for like a drone, right? And when I did that, I discovered that I would like I like fluid mechanics more than I like robotics. So I just decided that sets might be like the more better fit for me rather than ARC. So yeah.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
So, how important of a role does this community of clubs and departments play in helping a student's research career? And like, is it always the case that only those working in the tech clubs go into research?
Yeah, so that's a great question again. So I'd say it's basically like you should think of college as like a networking event, right? Like just an extended 4 year long networking event. Most of like in the current day and age, like whatever you learn at college can be learned on your own as well. It's just like a structured way to like learn things. The best thing that you can do in your first year is like to try as many things out as possible and like quickly narrow down on like what you want to focus. And I know like people say that you keeping your GPA up is really good and everything, but I think there are like there's like some threshold to which you can like recover like a bad GPA and like still end up with like a final like GPA which is like really good. um so I'd say the environment at clubs is basically like where you have like a bunch of people who are like working towards the same thing, and it's like the first it's basically going to be like for most people it's going to be the first time where they're like working in a team where you're like trying to achieve some sort of engineering goal. So in that sense they're like really good to like tell you whether you want to like go into like this field in the first place. But additionally, I also think that tech clubs is just like one way of doing this, right? You can do like I before I even joined college, I was like still doing like projects on my own and stuff. And you're always gonna find people out in the world who like want to contribute towards like like interesting research things or like interesting scientific things. So this it's not like a requirement to be in a tech club, but tech clubs definitely do help you get towards your goals. So I remember like in ARC, we were trying to like build this flute. Okay. It was basically it's like an automatic flute that we were trying to get ready for like Atmos and stuff. And we sat on it like almost all night, like multiple nights, and that was like really a grind. And I hated it at the time, but now thinking back on it, like I really like I find like a funny experience, and I also like find it like something which I appreciate that I was like instilled with that. Oh, this is like what an actual engineering team does sometimes and stuff like that. At sets I'd say like my conversation, like I joined sets as like a very, very early member, right? I was like one of the first like So it started like 1 year before I joined, but I was also like one of the core people who like was, you know, instrumental in like creating like the club structure and everything. But initially, like before, like a lot of people joined sets, I basically like interacted with like maybe, you know, like 6 or 7 people, and it seemed like a really close knit group. Like you had like Nivedan and like, you know, Abhinav, and people were like Subrat, who's like my good friend as well. And all these seniors always, you know, used to like seem so chill, and like they were like really great people to be around. Um, so yeah, I feel like those were my great memories.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear.
Mhm.
Okay, so moving forward, what steps did you take in your first year to, prepare yourself for the coming years of study? Was it, keeping your CG high, like the GPA high, or, learning to code, or just, interacting with professors much? Like, what were the steps did you take?
Yeah, so my first year was like pretty unstructured. I did not actually like think too much about like what I was doing. People told me that there was like these tech clubs and stuff, and I really wanted to like do this underwater robot competition, which was Arc was doing, and I also wanted to like do Spaceport America, which SETS was doing, right? So I basically just like entirely like optimized my life into like get like the first half of my first year was basically like trying to optimize my life into like getting into these clubs in the first place, and then after that I was kind of you know like focused on, you know, like COVID struck around like March 15th, right? So after that I was just like sitting at home, and I was like trying not to feel too depressed that I was like staying at home. So I didn't like optimize my first year too much. And also like I clearly didn't care too much about my GPA. uh, so I guess like in my first year all I was like thinking of doing was, you know, what is the best thing I can do at this point in time, which is going to like give me the most happiness. And I was just like optimizing for my own happiness at that point.
That's amazing. Looking back, what would you have done differently? Like, what do you feel that you would have done differently if you were given a chance to, live your first year again?
Yeah, so first thing I'd have done is like probably would have like studied a little bit more instead of like doing random things. Because obviously like you have like merit scholarship and stuff from like bits which I would have gone earlier if, you know, I had like a slightly higher GPA in my first year. Um, Other than that, honestly, like I feel like I did like a pretty good job of, you know, just like interacting with a lot of people and just like making really good friends. And you know, I still talk to my friends from my who I made in my first year. Like they became my wingies, and I'm still like really close with them. So I'd say that I overall like I did a really good job of, you know, I mean unintentionally, of course. I'm not going to like pat my own back too much here, but I think I my biggest regret was like not having like higher GPA, but that's about it.
Okay, so as you said that you would have gotten your merit scholarship a bit early than you got when you got it. So like when
Hmm.
was the time when you actually get the merit scholarship?
That was in my third year, second sem, I think, or maybe like fourth year. I don't exactly remember. It was something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's great. So what was your character development in all those 4 years? Can you just break that? Okay, you were this naive kid when you got into your first year, and then how was
Yeah.
the thing that happened?
Yeah. So basically, I'd say my biggest character development was I kind of like at the start of like first year, right? I was trying to like talk to as many people as possible. So I'm naturally like a very introverted person, and I generally do not like spending too much time around people. But in my first year, like the first day I came, I basically just organized this like huge like meetup at Rocks, and like literally almost like all of the freshers just like showed up at Rocks, and we were just like taking pictures and stuff. Uh, and while that's like good things to like, that's a good thing to do in your first year. Like as you like become, you know, slightly older and stuff, you kind of have like optimize for different things, right? So I'd say like as I grew older and as I like went into my second, third, and fourth years, I became a lot more isolated, or like I isolated myself a lot more, and I focused a lot more on my actual like research and like my like studies and stuff like that. So that was like my biggest character development, like you know, like character development. I wouldn't call it naivety because I was like, you know, I think it was a good thing in hindsight, like talking to a lot of people at the start and like not talking to a lot of people at the end, because people still like knew me, and like if I had to like get help from someone, I could still like reach out to them. But as I, you know, like one thing I do say though is like you shouldn't isolate yourself too much. because no man can like actually do anything by himself. So yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. Going forward, as you began to specialize in your second and third years, can you
Mhm.
mention the courses, the talks, or the professors that led you to develop an interest in your field?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of the mechanical engineering professors are like really excellent and they teach really well and they have like a lot of good knowledge and stuff. But two professors who like helped me the most or like were really instrumental in like figuring out my entire journey were Partha sir and also like Sabri sir. So both like I did not take any courses under Partha sir before I started working with him on research. But he was like really, he was like a really inspirational person to like work with and his research seemed like really good. And I did not do any like actual research with Sabri sir, but I was like his courses were like taught really well, and I really had fun doing like vibrations and control. So yeah, these were like two professors who like really helped me, like figure out like what I wanted to do.
Okay, that's great. We know that outside of projects, professors can also act as our mentors to give us pointers and advice about going
Mhm.
into their field, right?
Yeah,
So, did you have such a mentor on campus?
yeah, that was basically Partha sir for me. I used to like chat with him a lot about like specific things that I wanted to do and stuff. And he used to like give me ideas and he used to like tell me like he's like a very straightforward person. So when my idea was like not so good or like when I was doing something that was like kind of like it basically was like something which would not be ideal, he would like help me understand like why it was not ideal. So I'd say that he was like a kind of mentor for me on campus. So yeah.
That's inspiring. What
Mhm.
advice would you give to juniors while approaching profs to, have discussions in this manner? Do they mail them beforehand, catch them after class, or, show up during chamber consultation hours?
Yeah, so I have like a couple of thoughts about this. So my opinion is that most professors like are extremely willing to help you, right? Because they've been in your position before. They've almost all of them have like done engineering at like different colleges. And literally like for every single course that you take, you have like chamber consultation hours. And my experience has been that like for chamber consultation hours, like most people are like want to show up there for like reasons related to like academics, right? But in general, like after all, like professors are people, and if you have like an interest in like a specific subject, you should like definitely like go to the chamber consultation hours and like chat with them about like what interests you have and stuff like that. And they're honestly they're gonna be like very willing to like help you, and they're gonna be like very kind towards you when they realize that your interest is like really genuine. Because sadly for like most of the core branches, a lot of people do not have like actual interest in like their field, and they're just there because they were given it by the cutoffs. And having like a student who's like genuinely interested in like mechanical engineering or like electrical engineering or like whatever else, or even CS for that matter, like there's like a bunch of different CS things, but there's like a lot of people who just want to become like SDs at like a corporate company or something like that. So if you go to like a prof's chamber consultation hours and you basically like talk to them about like anything related to the field, and even things like that are outside the thing, right? My experience has been that they're like really willing to help you like almost 99% of the time. So yeah.
Oh, wow, okay. What other avenues are present for juniors to get career advice or clarity on pursuing their interest? Are these seniors, Facebook forum posts, or like what is it?
Yeah, so on career advice, I'd be very careful about like not like getting career advice from like the wrong places, because in my experience, like sometimes like what seniors do and say can seem like gospel, and it can also seem like you know it can seem like people are trying to like push your life in such a way that it's going to resemble their life. So the best career advice that you can get, or like the best guidance that you can get, is going to be essentially from yourself, right? Because you're gonna know like deep down what you're gonna like what you want to do. If you like really search, and if you like really try out like a bunch of different things and stuff like that, the only real career advice you should be getting is like advice which is gonna like direct you to like getting closer to your goals, right? So when people sometimes like I've seen a bunch of seniors, like when you like want to try research or something, or when you want to like try, like things which are not so like uh I don't know how to say it. I shouldn't call it like socially acceptable, but it's like some things which not a lot of people do on campus. Sometimes seniors will be like, oh, you should probably do like a finance minor, or you should do like, one of those things. And while it may seem like that's a safer option, it's almost never the case that the safer option is like the best thing for everyone. So you should like try, like I'd say like seniors are like a good thing. So the way I would, if I were in my second year right now, here's what I do, like get career advice. The first thing I'd have already done by my first year ended is like I'd have, like researched enough things and like done enough things to like figure out like at least like 90% of the way like what I actually want to do. And once I have that, I basically like, go and like find people who are like in places where I want to be. And then I reach out to them, right? And there's like a bunch of people who won't respond to you, but trust me, like they're not responding to you not because they don't like you or something, but it's mostly because they don't have time, right? So you need to like make it like the reason I'm like doing this interview in the first place, even though I'm like super busy, is because like I kind of like see this as like something which I can like get things out of as well, right? Like I can get something out of this, which is going to like help me in the future. So if you make it like a two-way, street, like where you're giving something and they're also like getting something, or you're getting something and they're also getting something, right? So that's the best sort of like dynamic I'd say, and that's not like going to be possible like 99% of the time, but essentially like look to seniors who are like graduated and look to people who are like in places where you want to be. Don't look to people for career advice to like where you should go. That's the way I put it, if I were to summarize that whole thing.
Oh, that's amazing. On a side note, as you know, you were like really social in your first year, and then you just decided to get focused and try to increase your GPA, or like study into research. How did you deal with FOMO in your second, third, or fourth year? Because like once you know how college fests are, or like once you know that how exciting it is to take part in Atmos and or something like that,
Yeah,
it's like really hard to deal with the FOMO, because like once you have uh like done it, like you have gone through that process once, so like
yeah.
how do you
So
revert?
that's a really good question, I'd say. FOMO is something that I've dealt with quite a lot actually, because there's like always like a million or like a billion choices that you can do at any given point in time. Like even right now, I might be just like doing some like I can do anything else that I wanted to do, right? So the best way to like deal with FOMO, I'd say, is like being like accepting of the fact that you're not going to be able to do everything that you want to do, and there's going to be like sacrifices that you have to make towards every single like any for any choice you make, like there's going to be a sacrifice that you have to make, right? And essentially like that sacrifice or like what you choose to give up is what defines you as a person, and it's like essentially like what defines your identity. And I guess like a part of it was, like FOMO was like slightly reduced for me because in my second year and some part of my third year, I didn't like really have fests, so I could like actually like hunker down and like actually like start studying and stuff. But I'd say the way you deal with FOMO is that that there's always this like feeling of like where people say, oh, these are college years, you should like actually like live them and stuff like that. But you get to define like what you choose your college like your what you choose your college years to be, right? And essentially like FOMO is basically your brain telling you that there's probably like greener pastures out somewhere, and that's not always the case. You're always gonna like being like you're always gonna miss out on something, and there's gonna be a point at which like you have to like just decide like, oh, I could be like doing college fests and stuff like that, but I could also like be on a yacht and like in the Bay Area or something like that. And for being on a yacht in the Bay Area, I have to study right now, so that way, you can basically like tell yourself that maybe studying is not that bad of a thing. So yeah,
Okay, that's really inspiring. But don't you think that it's a bit self sabotaging at points? Because like during JE times, you feel that okay, I'll go to the college and then this will be the fest. How it will be, I'll enjoy the fest, and at the like after a point of time when you are like actually in a college, you just like again think that okay, I'll just study for these 4 years again, so that I just go to the Bay Area and, as you said, that enjoy in it.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I'd say yeah, it has to be a balance, right? The fest only happens like 3 days out of like maybe 90 plus. And not studying for 3 days is not going to kill your entire career. So you should definitely go to fest if you want to. But at the same time, you should not have like that sort of enjoyment or like as a big priority in your life, right? Because when it becomes a priority, like you can obviously like be part of departments and stuff like that. So when you have like enjoyment as a priority, you kind of like lose sight of like the more important things in life, which is actually like doing new things and like discovering new, like for me, my purpose seems to be more like, what is the coolest thing that I can discover, or the coolest thing I can invent. And I feel like if you focus too much on enjoyment, that kind of like goes that kind of fades into the background, right? So it should be a balance, I'd say.
Again, that's an interesting perspective. So what about the juniors who have an interest in a field that no professor or senior is working on? Like, do you have any advice on how they might find guidance outside of campus?
Yeah. So for that, I'd say you have like a bunch of options. The first option is obviously like searching in different colleges. So in different colleges too, like essentially it's like the same thing. And before I say anything about this, right? The first thing I have to like say is like as an undergraduate student, you're not in a short supply. Like there's like a lot of undergraduate students out there who want to like do research, so you're not in short supply at all. But at the same time, like there's like a bunch of professors out there who will actually like do take on like undergraduate students and like help you like figure out like what you want to do. uh so I'd say just like reaching out to people again is like the best bet, like just reaching out to professors or like reaching out to researchers, just chatting with them but via email or something like that. Like honestly, there's like a lot of researchers out there who if you just like email them over the research, they'll reply to you and like they'll answer your questions like that, right? So I think of this as like many people like approach others with like the idea of like getting like a research internship or like stuff like that out of it. But honestly speaking, like I also like get a lot of those emails and I do not respond to like a lot of them. And again, it's like a time thing. It's not like that I hate you or something that I'm not responding to you. uh the most the emails which I do choose to respond to, or like the interaction which I do choose to have, it's like it's probably just someone who's like curious about like my journey and like who's actually like interested in me as like a person, as opposed to like trying to get something out of me, right? So I'd say having the genuine want for connection with someone who's like, obviously you're like not gonna like reach a lot of people that way, but if having like a genuine interest in someone and a genuine interest in someone's research, when you like mail them about it, they're usually like very responsive. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
That's amazing. Like the answers which you gave were like really inspiring.
Hmm.
I'd like to let Arushi ask the further questions.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So, could you tell us what led you to pursue your first few projects in the field?
Yeah, so I can go step by step. The first, I mean, if I start from like the very first thing, obviously the inspired thing is something I talked about. But what actually like inspired me to like join SEDS and like join art and stuff was basically that they were doing cool stuff, and that helped me like inform myself of like what actually I was interested in. Like for example, with like art, right? I knew that I kind of wasn't interested in like the kind of robotics that I would experience. Like obviously like there's a lot of like dynamics and stuff like that which I assumed I'd be interested in, but it wasn't really my thing. um so I figured out that I kind of like liked computational science and I like computational fluid dynamics, and I was like like looking out for like people who I can like actually reach out to and stuff. So I found this like IITB professor who I was introduced to by like my senior. I was introduced to like someone working at the lab, and I wanted to like try out like something related to like aerodynamics, and he basically had like a low speed experimental aerodynamics lab. But since it was COVID, it was like also computational. So we ended up like working with like XFLR phi and AVL and stuff like that, which are like really simple, like low fidelity codes for aerodynamics. And that kind of like seemed really cool to me at the time, and I wanted to like build these solvers myself. And even though I had like some exposure to like doing computational science before, like through courses and stuff like that, I actually like wanted to contribute like the development of these solvers and like actually like learn something to like build my own solver someday. And it seemed like a really daunting task at a time to like do on my own. So I just approached like father sir and I told him, like what you're doing seems like really cool and I would like to like do research based on this. So that's basically like what inspired me to like search out for his project. Yeah.
So, do you think this experience offered you into a window into how research is conducted? And is it because of this that you wanted to, explore things a little further?
Yeah, so the thing is, I guess like I kind of knew early on that I didn't want to do a PhD. Um, this is mainly just because, like it seems like a long time commitment and I kind of like having the flexibility of like trying out like a bunch of different things. But the research which I did definitely like did expose me a lot to like what like the field was doing and stuff, and that seemed like really interesting. The reason I decided like pursue a master's instead of like going for like a job or something was basically that I was like, oh, this seems really fun. And the kind of like jobs which you can do with like a bachelor's are like kind of limited with like what you can actually like achieve. Like you're not going to be assigned like doing like actual CFD and stuff. It's mostly going to be. I mean, I don't know how it is in India, but like at least in the US, like how it is with like just getting like a bachelor's degree is that you generally are given things which are more on the logistics side of mechanical engineering rather than like the or like design. Like you can basically become like a product design engineer or something, but you won't be doing any of the actual like like building or like the inventing and stuff. So for that I kind of like needed a master's degree, and that was what like led me to graduation.
Also, one of the questions that I think Arushi wanted to ask was that uh, basically, when before we go into research, before we take a project, we have an idea of how a research life is, like what is involved in doing a project, like from reading papers to conducting the actual research. Could you
Uh-huh.
tell us that, like, what was the difference between what you thought research was and what you thought about the research workflow in general after doing the project?
Yeah, so what I thought research was like not reading as many papers and like not actually like looking into like what other people have done and what basically like has existed before. And I thought it was like a lot more just like executing and like writing code and stuff like that. But research is maybe like 70% reading and writing and 30% like actually like doing your experiments or like doing your actual like like coding or whatever else. And honestly, that 70% of like reading and writing, I mean, I definitely do like reading papers, but I hate writing them. Okay, like I absolutely despise writing papers. Um, so that was like something which came as a shocker because I didn't really like want to write so much. So yeah, that does it answer the question?
Yep, it does. But also, what I wanted to ask was that when you first went into did a project, this is about your basically your first project. How did you
Hmm.
handle like getting stuck on a problem? Did you expect your supervisor to come help you, or did you expect no help, or somewhere in between? Like, how was like basically I
Yeah,
want you to describe how you managed to go through the research process instead of what you did research on in your first project.
yeah, sure, that makes sense. So basically, like I guess like when I first did my like my first research project, obviously like I didn't know like a lot in like computational science and stuff. I did like look to my supervisor, which is father sir, towards like like learning like what exactly I had to do and stuff like that. And I feel like generally I'd say it is good to like look at your supervisor, like look for guidance and stuff like that. But after I finished my first project, like my projects subsequently were like a lot more independent than just like looking to my supervisor for help. Like right now, I maybe like look to my supervisor only when I get like really stuck on a problem and I don't want like I look to them for like ideas, right? Rather than just like asking them on how to execute and stuff. So I'd say like one thing which I would have done, like one thing which has changed like from my start, like when I started researching to like now, is that I feel like a lot more. I felt like it was a lot less independent process than I was thinking back then, and it should be like a lot more independent process for everyone. Like you should like actually like look to reading research papers yourself and like executing yourself rather than like looking to your supervisor for all the answers, because honestly they do not have all the answers, and the reason you're doing research is like figure out the answers for yourself, right? So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Arushi can go ahead with the follow-ups.
Yeah. So, Was there a reason why you chose to do a project out of bits, the one which was based at IIT?
Yeah. So honestly, there was just like an opportunity that just landed at my door. Like, I was speaking to like Nivedan, and Nivedan's my senior, and he's like, there's this friend of mine who works at like Thrust MIT, which is like the Manipal, like rocketry team, and he was like working in like this lab at IIT, and he was like, we're looking for like two people to like take on a project over the summer, and it was just like an opportunity that just showed up at my door, and I was like, why, like, I'll do it, like, it's just, it was just like a thing of opportunity rather than a well researched or like a well thought out decision. Yeah, exactly. It was basically this nepotism.
Okay, great. And then you worked on projects in bits for like 2 years, mostly working in fluids. Do you
Mhm.
think that the projects we do in particular fields help you narrow down on what you want to choose in future?
Yeah, I definitely say the answer to that question is yes. But also like it's possible. I've seen like people who do like a lot of different projects in like a lot of different fields, and it's like very difficult for them like to actually narrow down. So I guess like I was the thing is when you're in your 20s, right? Like you don't exactly have like a lot of messing up of your life that you can do realistically, other than obviously like the obvious ways you can mess up your life. But I'd say like if you don't have everything figured out, like, and a lot of people do not, right? I'd say just pick something that you somewhat like doing and just like continue on with it, because you probably won't be in the same thing like maybe 4 or 5 years down the line. It very so often becomes the case that people don't do the things they were doing in like their undergrad in their grad school, like, and I'm like a very clear example of that. And also like it's it did like help me inform myself of like what I wanted to do, but it was mostly like just like here's something cool that I could be doing and I'm just doing it. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, and what criteria did you use to determine what you wanted to work in?
Well, my criteria was basically just like, do I enjoy doing this in the present moment? And does it have like some, at least like some, you know, innovation, or like, does it have like something that I can do which is kind of fun, in the future? Uh, and fluid dynamics was kind of like computational fluid dynamics was something like that, because, like it's obviously like applicable to like a lot of different industries, and it's always like, something that's seen as cool. Like, you can use it like design fighter planes and stuff. So when you're working on something cool, it's like not very difficult to like motivate yourself on to work towards that. So yeah.
So basically, when you're working in a field, you also have to be mindful of the workflow because even if it
Yeah.
looks cool, the workflow might be different from what you expect. So,
Mhm.
what about the CFD workflow? All the way from meshing to running the solution, debugging, and everything. What did you like in that workflow?
Yeah, so my favorite part of like the entire CFD workflow is like writing the actual code. So in CFD, you kind of have to like wait for your runs to finish and stuff like that, which is kind of annoying because like it's not like research in other fields where you can just like, I mean, you do have to like wait always like for something, right? Like in every research field, but I feel like in CFD it's like doubly so, because you kind of have the entire time when your solver is like running and you're not doing anything, and it's kind of like boring that way. My favorite part of the workflow in CFD was just like writing the code and like thinking of like new methods or like adding features to my solvers and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what I'd say for that question.
So you would say constantly adding new features by coding new stuff in that
Yeah,
you read.
exactly.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah,
Yes,
I really
Arush.
like writing code. So yeah.
Okay, okay. Yes, Arush, you can go ahead with the next question.
Yes, so do you have any advice to students who are trying to approach professors for projects?
Yeah. So as I said before, I'd say like the best thing to do when you're like approaching a professor for a project is like to treat them like an actual person and to treat this as like a mutual exchange, right? Because they have like research that they want to do, and they have like some ideas for research that they want to do. It's going to be very unlikely that you're not going to get like a positive response from a professor if you are genuinely interested and they have like the bandwidth. So the two reasons that a professor might reject you is like one, for one reason also obviously like they don't have the bandwidth. They have like too many students already and they can't give like more projects to like more students. And for that, like just starting earlier to look for projects, like maybe in your second year, second sem or something like that would be like best. Um But other than that, I'd say like just having like a genuine interest in what are the professors doing, and like thinking of like their needs as well is like the best thing to like get positive responses from professors. So yeah.
Yes, over to Manas.
Okay, so before I move forward with the next questions, Abhijit, I have this one question which I have been having in my mind since like the start of the interview.
Hmm.
So you're doing a startup right now, right? Like after your masters. So what is the why of it? Like like what is the mission statement of the same?
Yeah, so essentially, like the fact is that a lot of people do not like have the necessary expertise to like actually like drive engineering decisions. And in like these big enterprise companies, right, you have like a lot of basically like a lot of people who like do the actual design, and there's also like a lot of people who do the simulation stuff, but there's like no actual like all the tools that exist today kind of like only inform you as much as like of the results rather than of like what you can do with the results. So while we are like a definitely like a physics informed ML startup, there's also like some like actual like discovery of like new physics which is going on underneath, which we're trying to do. So the discovery in new physics is something like essentially like I have this like crazy idea of like where I want to like explore exoplanets and stuff, and there's this thing called like the Alcubierre drive, right? Which is something which you can use to like bend space time to like go faster than light without violating any like actual physical laws. And one of the major constraints for that is that you cannot like find negative mass out existing out in reality. But there is some factor of like, if you could actually like supercharge the ability of like people to do research to like helping them answer the questions they have about their own data or like whatever data sets they're collecting. Because there's like a lot of people out there who are like working on actual physics informed ML where it's just like improving simulations or like making solvers faster and stuff like that. But as most people know, like computers always get way faster. Like there's always like more compute to be like, you know, do stuff on. And I think just like trying to solve the problem of like having faster solvers is not the right thing to do. So my why is basically like, I want to explore exoplanets and I want to like build a tool for that, which will help me like research the I guess like how do you get to like faster in light, right? So it's like a very silly thing, but that's like my why of it.
That's amazing. I don't think it's silly at all. But yeah.
Yeah.
So Abhijit, like what kind of a person does a thesis according to you? Like do only the top 1% do it? Only the people with good GPA or the extreme interest in this field, or people looking to opt out of PS? Like is it something which people do for a CG boost? Like what I feel is a better way to frame this question would be like if a third or a second year right is trying to make a decision about whether to do thesis or not, then what
Mhm.
qualifies like for if qualification even exists them to do a thesis in terms of their profile or interests.
Yeah, honestly, in terms of profile, I'd say like even if you don't not if you don't have profile too, like still do a thesis. And I guess like one thing which is not mentioned here is like whether we're talking about on-campus or off-campus thesis. And in my opinion, like both an off-campus thesis and an on-campus thesis are the same thing. One of the people in my cohort and who was like a part of my lab as well, she basically like did an on-campus thesis, and she also like ended up at Stanford. So I don't think like an on-campus thesis is anything lesser than an off-campus thesis. That being said, I think like the more important question is like what exactly drives a person to do like the thesis or like a PS. And personally, like for me, like the entire like PS process and like the entire placements process is kind of weird because people kind of tend to look on placements and PS as like a crutch in India, and unfortunately, like that's the only way you can like get fresher jobs in India, or like it's one of the best ways you can get like a fresher job in India. But again, you're very much at like the mercy of like the placement division or like what other companies come to campus and stuff like that. If you can find like a good job through that, that's fine. But I'd say like a thesis allows you like more flexibility and like what you can do, and like just or even if it's like a corporate thesis, right? You can like go out and like do a corporate thesis. It just gives you like a lot more flexibility in like what sort of companies you can like approach and or like what sort of research labs you can approach and stuff like that. I'd say definitely do not disqualify yourself, like thinking like, oh, I do not have like a good enough profile. I cannot do like a thesis. It's going to be easier for you to like get an on-campus thesis, but there's been like cases where people with like not a lot of research experience have gone out and like gone with thesis and stuff like that. Because personally speaking, like for an undergraduate to have like research experience is like something very surprising. Like in Stanford as well, like when I speak to like other master students, there's like not a lot of people here who have like actual like papers written or something like that. So when you're comparing yourself against some standard, right? Like, and I found that like very surprising. When you're comparing yourself against some certain standard, it's if you're doing a thesis just for like fun, that's fine as well. But do not like disqualify yourself for a thesis saying that you don't have enough research experience. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
I just wanted to add one thing was that for some people basically they feel that they're not ready to do a thesis even if they
Right.
might want to do it. So
Mhm.
would you say that if someone is just beginning to form an interest in the field and they are
Mhm.
interested in exploring it further, do they take that plunge and go for that 6 month stint for conducting research?
Yeah, so I'd say this is like an individual, thing, and people have to decide for themselves. But more concretely, like what advice I can offer there is, I would say like to everyone who's like thinking of like whether TS or PS would be best for them. I'd say you're just in your 20, like in your 20s, right? Like you're probably not more than 22 or 23, like years old. And when you're that age, like the your imagination of like how much your choices affect your future is going to be a lot more than what it really is. Like for example, like if you start off with a thesis and then you decide like, oh, research is not for me, and you want to like get into like a good job or something, you're going to be like slightly hindered for like maybe a year or so, but you're still going to get like a really, it's not impossible for you to like have a great career, right? So I say don't overthink it too much. Just like do whatever you feel like, and it'll probably work out well in the end as long as you keep moving forward. So yeah, that's what I'd say to that.
That's great. That's great, Abhijit.
Okay, so Abhijit, what is the process for getting a on-campus thesis, and how is it different from getting a remote off-campus one?
Yeah, so I won't speak too much about like the logistics of like submitting the thesis forms and stuff because that's not really the best way to answer this question, and I don't think like that's something I remember as well. But for on-campus thesis, it's just the same as like a project where you like ask like a professor like that you want to like work with them on like this thesis, and then you just like reach out to them. For an off-campus thesis, the way most people do it is like by emailing like a bunch of different professors and spam, like maybe I wouldn't call it, I mean it is essentially spamming, so I'll call it that. They basically like spam 100 professors or so, or like 100 research labs, and then they reach out to a lot of people and like try to get a thesis. I'd say like a better way to do it is like to actually like look at uh the way I did it at least is like look at internal job boards which these professors put up for like undergraduates to work in their labs, and then like just find something that you like and just like reach out to a person who's like listed that, because most people in like in research they are working like with very tight budgets, and the expectation is that most people would be like willing to pay you for like doing work. But it's not just that, they also have like limited time, right? And they have like given enough time to like graduate students as well. So when you like reach out to like random people or like random professors who don't actually have the time to like respond to you, you're essentially doing nothing except like filling up their inbox. And it's very easy for for you to like write the email, and it's going to be like very generic. But I've seen like a lot of complaints from actual professors who say that these generic emails do not like they kind of get annoyed by them. So I say like emailing people who have like positions, asking them for they have any open positions in the lab is not the best thing to do. It's better to like either like reach out to your network and like find a thesis that way, or like look for like job boards and stuff like that, find a thesis. So yeah.
And how do you go forward with the job boards? Like, where do you find them?
They're just online, honestly. You
Oh,
just like search up, like open research question at X college or something in X field. And obviously you're gonna have like a lot more variability there and like the kind of like research that you can do. But like I said, you're just in your 20s, and what you do right now doesn't like really determine your future too much. So yeah.
so Abhijit, what were the specific qualities in your profile that would say that contributed to your selection by the thesis supervisor?
Well, I'd say that I had like a lot of experience like doing CFD and stuff, and they were looking for someone who's like a CFD expert. Uh, so that's like basically like what qualified me, I guess. At the same time, like I was also like, my thesis supervisor is like a great person. So I was So here's how it works. Like usually the way it works in these labs, like you have your like PI, and then there's also like other people who are like mentors and stuff. So I'm basically like talking about my mentor here because like he's like the person who I interacted with the most. So I guess like my mentor was like doing the interview for me, and he just like I was able to like impress him and stuff like that. So I still believe like we're like pretty close friends. But I'm still like very good friends with my mentors. So yeah.
Also, Abhijit, what was your thesis topic?
It was like CFD for like a halogen instrument, which was trying to like, you know, I guess like figure out how many free radicals of like fluorine and chlorine and stuff like that were like in the upper atmosphere. So they
Yeah.
have like this solar aircraft that they have like an instrument on, and they were like trying to see like what the turbulence inside the instrument was. So yeah,
Okay.
that was my thesis. Yeah.
And when you say about the mentorship style, where usually we have a main PI who brings you
Hmm.
on board, and then there are different mentors who might be PhD students or other postdocs and all.
Yeah.
So, do you think, would you say that this sort of style is followed in a lot of labs across the world?
Yeah, I'd say that that's like honestly, like I'd probably even like reach out to like PhD students and some professors when you're looking for a thesis, because honestly, like even for me as a grad student, sometimes like reaching out to my professors and like getting replies from them is like difficult. So, it is something which is like pretty common in like big labs. So yeah,
Makes sense, makes sense. Just to inform people of how supervision styles are.
yeah,
Yeah, Manas, you can go ahead.
So, Vijay, did you find any difference in supervision style between BITS and Harvard?
yeah. I'd say like both of them were essentially like obviously like I wasn't in too much contact with my PI at Harvard, which I've already spoken about. But overall, like it was pretty much the same. Like I was having like a close relationship with like whoever was my direct point of contact, and they were like guiding me and like giving me like I obviously like became slightly more independent by the time I like got in like the Harvard thesis and stuff. But I would say like there's not too much of a difference in the amount of guidance I got or like the quality of guidance that I got. So yeah.
Oh, that's cool to know.
Mhm.
And I would like to, ask Kareen Via to go forward with the next questions.
Yeah, Abhijit. So a little bit more field specific. That's why I was brought on. But
Mhm.
basically, in your work at both like Stanford and Intel, you've used generative models and machine learning for like computational tasks.
Yeah.
So basically, we see a movement right now that we're moving a little bit more towards data-driven approaches
Hmm.
and moving slightly away from conventional solvers. Would you compare the two in terms of feasibility, in terms of capability? And would you
Yeah.
say, is it even a right reason? Is it even right to compare the two approaches, or are they like separate? Are they made for separate work cases?
Yeah. So the way conventionally I'd say the current conventional solvers and way physics informed models work right now is that there's already this thing called reduced order modeling that has existed for like quite a while in like the field, right? Where you have like a bunch of different uh like you train like or you basically like generate a bunch of solutions and then you train like this reduced order model on them, and this reduced order model can be then used to like get like really fast solutions within the parameter space that you're searching, right? So physics informed methods are basically the same as like a reduced order model, except they have like they're more conducive to like nonlinearity because of the like network in between them. I'd say the fact that we've seen that reduced order models have not like completely replaced CFD is probably fact enough that like physics informed ML will, I mean, just like physics informed ML, that's like every other company is doing them. Like, like there's something missing here, like which is basically making them not replace like all solvers. And basically, like what's missing is that the current methods kind of like require a lot of data to train. And when you go outside the like data sets you're training, and when you're in the extrapolatory domain, you just kind of have to like rely on like there's like a lot of uncertainty on whether your solution is even correct in the first place.
Yeah,
And the other thing is you have to like run like a bunch of simulations anyways, right? Which is not like ideal.
yeah.
My startup is actually like trying to solve the problem of like having to run like other simulations and like needing like a lot of simulation data. And we just do this like a proprietary way of like actually constructing the physics informed models. So yeah, I'd say if my startup works out, you probably will see like a lot more. Yeah, ML, but if it doesn't, I'd say it's the main limitation is the fact that you have to have like a lot of data to train them.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, so for people looking to get into PyML and this branch of CFD or just computational science in general, what
Uh-huh.
resources would you tell them, that books or any courses that are there that helped you as well, while you're in your journey to, like,
Yeah.
doing
So
stuff?
that's a good question. For general, like I'd say physics informed ML is basically just having like, it's essentially the same as like regular ML, except it like focuses on regression. And sometimes you have like weird stuff in your loss function, which is, just like the residual of, like the differential equation which you're trying to solve or something like that. In terms of books or anything, I don't have like really good advice because I didn't like learn through books. I learned by like reading research papers. There's like a bunch of research papers out there. Some famous ones are obviously like the original physics informed ML research paper, and there's like a lot of papers out of like Anand Kumar's lab, which are like focusing on neural operators and stuff like that. And so I'm not really the right person to ask about this because by the time I was like getting into physics informed ML, I was like over the point of like reading textbooks or like research papers. Not research papers, sorry, like reading textbooks or like doing courses. I'd say like research papers are like the best way to learn about this stuff. So yeah.
Great, that makes sense. Also, so when we're coming to uh, ML models for computational science,
Hmm.
um, do you ever feel that these models can have hyper-specific use cases? And have you sort of discovered these hyper-specific use cases, if you're willing to share them?
Yeah. So the thing is, like I said, for any physics informed model that you train, it's essentially the same as like a reduced order model, right? Where you have to like generate like a bunch of data, and then you like uh use it for that. There's obviously been like a lot of like exploration into like how these like models, not exactly physics, but like how these models can be used for like material discovery or like biological stuff like protein folding and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But these are again like really specific cases which are like serving a lot of like really valuable use cases because if you know how to like like fold proteins, you kind of like know how to like design drugs and stuff as well.
yeah,
um and material discovery is obvious an obvious thing. So I'd say like for those like kind of like high value, like which have like a lot of money in them and they have like there's this YC startup who's like a friend of ours, okay?
okay,
And they basically like are trying to like find pesticides which are disrupting like the crickets. Like like crickets and locusts are like really a big deal like for agriculture, right?
yep, yep, yep,
So, and pesticides are like not really a good thing.
yeah.
So they have like this protein folding startup that's like trying to develop like a biological pesticide that like disrupts the protein folding of like crickets, right?
Wow.
So for those kind of like hyper specific use cases, like ML models are like really good. But the idea is that obviously for like CFD as well, they have like some cases of like where people like design models for like cars and stuff like that. But if you think about it, right, like a lot of the car design right now is like already done through like conventional CFD. So I think having like like having an actually generalizable physics informed ML model is like a great thing that really definitely needs to exist. And that's like something which people are trying to solve right now through like the creation of like a foundation model or something.
Okay.
But it's not exactly like the best thing to, like it's the current methods that exist kind of do not like serve mechanizing well, and even in industry like there's like answers optics line and stuff like that which is like trying to like try to replace some aspects of simulation. I'd say when you have ROMs, why would anyone use like a physics informed model?
Yeah, makes sense.
I mean, there's obviously like the non-linearity part of it, but people don't like replace all of their CFD workflows with ROMs. So yeah.
And last question from my side. You mentioned that the current old PyML models that you're trying to replace or trying to build on and improve, their main issue is that they require a lot of data sets to actually train themselves on, which would in turn
Yeah.
require more simulations. So
Yeah.
obviously that is their drawback. But could you tell what are the major challenges of what you're building right now?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. So essentially, like what we're building is like a layered structure, right? So there's like three layers to it. So layer zero is basically like our actual like physics informed model, which is like generalizable like a lot of different domains, like where we have like four different pillars basically, like one for CFD or like one for fluid dynamics, one for structural, one for thermal, and
Yeah.
the final one for like E&M, which is like electromagnetics, right? So when it comes to like building these like generalizable models, your biggest concern here is like how your data set's going to look, and whether your data set's actually going to cover all of like CFD or all of like structures and stuff like that. So data set design is like the biggest challenge that we've been facing so far. Level one, which is like a step above that, is like trying to like discover new physics from your data set, because obviously like there is some relationship between like your actual data and like your what you're trying to optimize for, right? So if you remember, like if you are familiar with like autoencoders, we essentially like compress our physics down into like a latent space. We try to like discover new physics in this latent space, which can then be used to like inform your physical, like or your physical parameters or like your actual design decisions. So for that, I'd say like having like a really rich data set that covers all of your use cases is the biggest thing. And also like the other thing which like our architecture is like kind of unique in the sense that it can generate like a lot of things, but the having like a varied enough data set is like a biggest challenge right now. So yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense.
Can we talk a bit about your master's application? You were a topper of your batch and could have easily shifted to the industry. What
Mhm.
prompted you to, continue to pursue a master's? Did you perform a cost benefit analysis before going ahead with it?
I did
If
actually. Yeah.
yes, then can you just, explain your reasoning?
Yeah, sure. So I had like a very rigorous approach towards like doing my master's application. I saw like I mean I obviously have like a tendency to be overconfident and like what I'm capable of and stuff like that. But I I saw like what the average pay would be like if I graduated with my master's, and like how much I have to like put down for like the education loan and stuff. And it was like a very obvious decision from like doing numbers that like doing the master's is like the best bet. This obviously didn't like take into nuances like like actually getting a job and stuff, but like I said, I'm like a very overconfident person. So essentially I ran the numbers. I ran like the monetary cost benefit analysis, and I also like saw like what exactly I could do in India, like was what I could do in the US. And I know like fundamentally like India is like picking up in like terms of research and stuff like that. But I eventually like wanted to start a company, and not unfortunately like a lot of companies that come out of India, like a lot of companies which get like funding in India, are not as like they don't have like they're basically like service based companies. Like you have like Swiggy, Instacart and stuff like that, which people give funding for. And while that's like not a bad thing, I wanted to like build a company which was like actually like solving a problem, and I kind of needed to be in a place where VCs were, like more willing to like take riskier bets on like new, like hard tech, like actual like innovative technology as opposed to like just copying under like US or like Western startup. So yeah, that is my reasoning towards like going towards you know the masters.
But like as you said that you were like really really overconfident, but like
Mhm.
again that opportunity cost which a person feels when you are not like not going with the conventional path and
Yeah,
missing out on a lot of money. So
yeah,
like what was your thought process behind it, like on ground?
yeah. So essentially, like the amount of money that you can make in India as like a mechanical engineer is obviously like not a bad amount, right? You can like make a decent living out of it. But if you run the numbers, you can just make more in the US. If you even if you just like were not to do a startup and you just like were to like do a job or something, the amount you can make in the US is like a lot more. This doesn't take into account the fact that you may not get a job, and like the job market's like really not great right now. So I'd say like if I were to like do the session today, I'd probably think a little bit more about that. But my like my reasoning was that I'm not like losing anything out here by like staying in like not by staying in India, sorry, like by going to US. And like I said, getting a job in like corporate is like not the hardest thing in the world. It's pretty easy to do, and like most people do it anyways. Like in India, when you're in India, you have like a tendency to believe that like Google or like all these fan companies like which are amazing, like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, etc., etc. Like people think that once they get in there, they're like, oh, I'm like this amazing person who's like optimized their life entirely or something. But I have to remind you that these are like employers who you work for, and these are like people who are essentially the same as you, and you're just like working at a company at the end of the day. You're not like making too much of like a difference to the world. uh I mean, you might be, you might be like eventually, but in your 20s, like the best thing you can do is like obviously start a startup. Let's say if you want to make a difference, and if you don't, I mean, obviously not like not everyone wants to like do their own thing or stuff like that. But I've never been like a fan of like working in corporate. So yeah.
Okay, that is a really amazing answer. But like, how did you shortlist your colleges? Like, was there a criteria that you followed while doing so?
Yeah, so I just okay, so being entirely honest, I just went to like the QS rankings and just like looked at a bunch of top colleges and just applied to them. but but to give you a more serious answer, right? Like on the way I saw shortlisted colleges, I actually like researched like what labs were at each college, and I was like, oh, this lab is good, or like I would like to work with this person or something like that. And I also like researched a little bit about like the culture on the campus, like if there's like a lot of like startup exposure or stuff like that, because that's like, essentially like what I wanted to do with my life eventually. And before like doing my masters, I was like, I might do this like when I'm 28 and it'd be useful to have the connections. But I'm really glad that I picked colleges which have like great startup culture on campus, because I would not have taken this plunge if I wasn't convinced by my, I mean, not convinced, but like if my co-founder hadn't like reached out to me and like actually asked me like do the startup. So yeah, I'd say I prioritize the quality of research, or like the research which interested me, and also like the amount of startup culture on campus. So yeah.
Hmm. That again answers my question. But like, how important is a SOP for a master's application? Can you describe the elements of a good SOP?
Yeah, so here's the thing about SOPs. I have like no idea, because although I did get into college, it'd be like very wrong for myself like call myself an expert on like what colleges to look for in your master's application. But here's like what I understand of it, right? Your statement of purpose is just like something which you write to express interest towards joining the college. What matters a lot more, I feel, is like your letters of recommendation, right? Because what your CGPA is one thing, but everyone has like a great CGPA. Like who is like applying for like the top colleges? Everyone, literally everyone has like a great CGPA. And when you have like when your professors are like writing your letter of recommendation, they have like this option of like choosing like whether you're like in top 2% of students they work with, top 1% of students they work with, and stuff like that. And they also have like any additional comments that they can add, and that's like where the letter comes in. So the best way for like college like actually like vet you is through this letter of recommendation system. Your SOP is like obviously something that you can optimize, but the true thing which you cannot optimize that well, like once you like start applying for colleges, is your letters of recommendation. So I'd say don't think too much about your like. I'm assuming that the person reading like listening to this part like podcast or whatever is like a person who's like in the second or third year. I'd say for your SOP, like don't think too much about that. And honestly, just like get advice from like actual seniors in your life and like people who like gone into your field and stuff. I don't think that the SOP is like that important. What matters more is like getting like good letters of recommendation. So yeah.
Okay, so as you have mentioned about the letters of recommendation yourselves, who are
Mhm.
your letter of recommendation writers, and like how does one classify a LOR into weak, strong, or a moderate one?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I have like like I had two letters of recommendation from like Bitstross. One was like Partha, the other one was like Sabarish. And the third one was basically from like PI at Harvard. So I'd say like I don't really understand what like how you classify like these letters of recommendation as strong, medium, or weak, because personally speaking, like I would not ask for like a letter of recommendation from someone who would not give me like a strong recommendation, right? Because I feel like if you're gonna ask someone for like a letter of recommendation, they should be the kind of person who's like willing to like support you like 100% of the way, or like willing to like give you like a really like they should be telling the college that you're like the right person for like everything, right? And if you're gonna get like a weak letter of recommendation, I'd say that's more the person who doesn't know you, or like it's gonna be like the person who doesn't really care too much about you because they haven't like worked with you, right? So I'd say I would advise people not to like like qualify letters of recommendation based on like weak, strong, or like medium or whatever. I'd rather advise people to like think about whether this person is like someone who would like actually support me, and someone who like wants to see me succeed. And if they are someone who has like a high interest in like wanting to see you succeed, then ask them for it. If not, do not like I would say like don't even get like a letter of recommendation at that point.
That's a Great answer, Abhijit. I just had one thing to ask. So basically, I know it's subjective for everyone, how
Hmm.
much they know a person or how close they are to a supervisor or anyone who they're willing to write an LOR for.
Yeah.
But what would you say, according to you, would be the level of work that someone would need to do so that they can ask an LOR from the person above them?
Okay, so that's a great question again. I think of it as like, it's better to be close to your supervisors than not be, right? And the level of work which you do is like obviously going to depend on like the projects you're doing and stuff. But fundamentally, like what you should think about is like, again, it's very much so that do I know this person really well? And if I know this person really well, they probably know you really well as well, right? And if they are like willing to like vouch for your success, then I'd say like that's what is the threshold for which you should like get the recommendation from them. So yeah,
Makes sense. Makes sense.
yeah.
So, essentially what you mean is that rather than, looking at looking at the specification, or, looking at the qualifications of the person you are getting an LOR from, we
Hmm.
must, prefer knowing them better. Is that what?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and like,
But obviously, like qualifications do matter. Okay, but I'd say the bigger thing is that whether they're like willing to like strongly vouch for you or not. Yeah.
Okay. Usually 2 to 3 LORs are needed for a master's application.
Hmm.
So do you have any advice for students on, cultivating a good relationship with their supervisors so that they can, ask LOR from them down the line?
Yeah. So think of them as people, obviously, and do not treat your supervisor as someone who you're getting something out of. After all, your supervisors are people themselves. They have their own goals, they have their own dreams, they have their own wishes, right? So think of them as people and just like be nice to people who you know, obviously. Like they're after all like people in your life who you know, and they're obviously like you work with them in like some sort of like a professional capacity, but fundamentally they have like goals themselves as well. So help them achieve their goals out of like kindness and like out of being like actually someone who wants like support them towards like reaching their goals as well, and they'd be like 100% willing towards like writing goals for you which work out for you. So yeah.
Okay, that's amazing again. So I have this aspirational question again. So,
Mhm.
like, what would you say helped you to get your acceptance into Stanford? Was it your GPA? Was it a good research experience, or were it LORs? Because it's like a dream come true for some people for getting accepted at Stanford after graduating from BITS.
Yeah, so I think, well, that's a really good question because I don't exactly know what like caused me like get accepted at Stanford, but I'd say there's like a hint of like I have like a strong feeling that it was my letter's recommendation, but in addition to that it was also like like what I conveyed of myself as like a person. So Stanford's like really collaborative and it's also like really interdisciplinary. Like there are some colleges which do claim to be interdisciplinary, but they don't actually have like a lot of interdisciplinariness. And Stanford's program is like a terminal master's, which means they don't intend for you to like get a PhD afterwards after you like graduate from the program. And there's obviously like a strong startup culture on campus. So I was like, I mean, I did say that my SOP was kind of like not the biggest factor, but I did express in my SOP that I wanted to like start my own thing at some point. Um, so I'd say like it was mostly just a culture fit plus my letter of recommendations, which helped me get into Stanford. Uh, I mean, GPA is like I think of like GPA as like this thing which is like a cutoff. Like if you're above a certain GPA or like if you're above like if you have like a good GPA, then obviously you're gonna have like higher chances. But it's not something which tells anything about you as a person and what the campus is looking for when they like actually like get you on like as a grad student. Is that does this person like make the school look good, or will they have like a high chance of like making the school look good? As long as you like can like make that come true, like or you can prove that that's actually going to be true, like through your entire application, then you're going to have like a very high chance of being accepted.
Oh, that was a really,
Yeah.
comprehensive answer to it. Abhijit, I have this, one question that if a person is, wanting to do interdisciplinary research, like for
Mhm.
example, someone took a MSc, like, the dual degree of MSc physics, and along with it, they, pursue the electronics and electrical, for example. But
Mm-hmm.
then as they move forward with their dual major, they just feel that, okay, this is not something which they feel like doing a research in, and they're more intrigued towards, for example, finance, or for example, environment. And so
Mm-hmm.
how does a person like approach that case? Because it would just be like wandering here and there, and when there's this application or the process which a
Yeah,
person, that obviously what I feel is would take them down, because of the fact that they are like trying to do something which they are not pursuing a formal degree in. So
yeah.
like what would you advise to such a person?
Well, if there's like two questions, I think, and I want to like clarify that I'm understanding them correctly before I proceed to answer them. So the first question, which I guess is being asked here, is like, what advice do I have for like people who feel like they're wandering too much, or like trying too many different things at once, and they're not like focusing. And I guess like the second question after that is like, what should people who do not apply for, like a grad school or something like that in their own field, like, what do they do, right? Are those two questions?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so for the first question, I'd say for like people who feel like they're wandering too much, right? I'd say in general, life is like essentially just like wandering too much, right? Like you will be trying something today and you probably will not be doing it tomorrow, and you'll end up in like places where you don't expect to be at all. So if you feel like in your college you're like focusing on like too many different things, so like you're doing too many different things, don't worry about it at all. Again, like you're just 22 or 23, and there's at least like 60 more years where you can like live your life, and you're not even like lived, you know like the fraction of life that you lived is like very small, and like maybe half of that you spend as like a kid and like not doing anything which is actually going to be productive. I want you to like think about what decisions in your past have like actually like completely changed the trajectory of your life, and if you think about those things, there are like like for example, if you're thinking about like a finance manager right now, right, and you were choosing to like do PCM or like not doing commerce in your like in your high school, that decision of like not doing commerce and the fact that you can do finance minors right now and like get a finance job is essentially like it's proof enough that you can like do anything you want with your life without like, there's always like ways to do like what you want with your life without being too, like concerned about like how much things are going to change. Like you're never locked into a decision, right? So I'd say it's fine if you're like wandering. It's you're just 20s, like in your 20s. For the second question, for when you're trying to like do things which are outside your field or like outside what you're actually like studying, I'd say there are like a lot of people who do those kind of things. For CS specifically, I can tell you like what uh I did. I mean, I did like obviously like apply for CS masters, but I did like do CS as my internship, right? So essentially, like what I did was I basically like I had like a lot of projects which I could speak of, and I have like a lot of coding experience. So you need like prove some way that you can, like actually show that you have like these sort of, you have the ability to like do these other things which are not related to your major at all. Because like I said, like your major is just like very something, it's just like a piece of paper, right? It doesn't really matter that much. Your college is entirely just like a networking experience, and you can learn everything online anyways. You just have like prove this to like recruiters, or like prove this to like people who are doing your grad application or stuff like that. So just have like some sort of proof and you'll be fine, so don't think too much about it. So yeah.
But like don't you think that having like interdisciplinary interests hampers your application process in in any way? Like for
I
example,
don't
as
think so.
you mentioned, what?
I don't actually think so, because it does hamper your, I mean, hamper as in like it makes things slightly more difficult, yes. But when you say hamper, right, that means that it makes things so difficult that you cannot like deal with them. I'd say it makes things slightly more difficult, but essentially like it's basically a culture fit thing again. Like there are colleges out there who do like take in interdisciplinary people, like Stanford, for example, because almost everyone who I know in like mechanical engineering is like doing something outside mechanical engineering as well. So there are colleges out there who do like interdisciplinary things and who like want interdisciplinary people, and there are colleges who want you to like focus, right? Like for example, MIT, which is like a program which I didn't get into. It was not a good fit for me because there your master's degree is like an exploration of like whether you want to like go for a PhD afterwards, right? Which is not exactly when I knew already that I didn't want to do a PhD. If I was writing in my SOP that I want to like start a company or something, then obviously it mean that they wouldn't want to pick me, right? So it's essentially culture fit thing. There's always going to be a place which is right for you. And when you like decide on what college you want to do, like this is an important thing to consider. It's going to be slightly more difficult when you consider like, oh, I'm someone who's like transitioning from like field A to field B or something. It's going to be difficult, but it's fine. It's not going to be that challenging as you think. But yeah.
Okay, that specifically answers my question. Arush, you can go forward with the next ones.
Yeah. So both research and entrepreneurship, they lead students to, kind of unconventional paths. And
Mhm.
they're obviously, they invite risks and challenges. So do you think you should utilize time to explore such opportunities?
Yeah. So I'd say 100% yes. You should do things that are unconventional. But I'd say the biggest thing, the worst thing that you can do in your 20s is that you do not take enough big risks and you end up like, doing like some random corporate job which you're not happy at. So like I feel like a lot of what happens on campus is like optimized towards like getting the Google SWE internship or something where you're like like writing a bunch of like JavaScript code or something like that, right? And if you think about it, that's like a very safe, very boring kind of life to lead. And it's very true that it's probably not for everyone, right? Like because who really likes writing JavaScript? I mean, there are people who like writing JavaScript, but I don't imagine that it's like the most. It's not the best thing which people could be doing with their time for most people. So it's it's very good to like take risks in whatever you're doing, and the worst thing you can do in this point, and I'd say like there's not many things you can do in your 20s to like ruin your life entirely, right? I think one of the biggest things you can do in your life, which is going to ruin your, or not ruin, but like it's going to like set you up for failure, is like playing it too safe and like playing all the safeguards and doing exactly what you're told to do and stuff like that. Because the conventional things exist for a reason, right? They're kind of like serving some sort of purpose where you kind of like lead. I wouldn't call it mediocre, but you're kind of like leading a safe life, like where you're a contributing member of society and stuff like that. If too many people did risky things, then society would not function. But that doesn't matter for you. Like if people are going to like even after like listening to this podcast, I'd imagine like 99% of people are going to think like what I'm saying is like bullshit anyways, and they're not going to like take enough risks. But if you are like one of those people, I mean, this is just my opinion, but if you're like one of those people who thinks that they can do better than just like some random corporate SWE job, then definitely you should like consider taking more risks in your life. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
So, as you answered this question, something came into my mind. So, what do you think about the public image of, being at BITS is as compared to what it actually is? Because, like, before taking admission in BITS,
Uh-huh.
what I saw from, like, a lot of videos, be it a lot of blog posts, is that it is, said that there's a really thriving space for entrepreneurship, and, you can, like, really do better if you want to do business, if you get into bits. But
Uh-huh.
like, my personal experience was that when I came here, it was not as I expected. It was like most of the people are actually reading for jobs.
Yeah.
And like, what are your views on the same?
So that's a really good question. I'd say the things which I tell you about bits are not wrong at all. There is like a lot more entrepreneurship at bits than at other colleges. The fact is that out of like maybe 1,000 people which exist in the world, maybe like two of them are out of every 1,000 people that exist in the world, maybe two or three of them will be like actual entrepreneurs, right? Because it's too risky of a thing to actually start a startup or like even start your own small business. Um, so what you're experiencing is a mismatch of expectations. Like the expectation should be that at BITS, it'd be slightly more entrepreneurship than you would see like at other colleges. So even at Stanford, when I say that Stanford is like really great for entrepreneurship and stuff, and like everyone here has a startup, I don't mean literally everyone, right? Because out of all my friends and all of my international friends and stuff, most of them are like who are PhDs, so like obviously doing research, and they would never think of starting a company. And most of the people who like actually I'm friends with, like I'm not friends with like a lot of like entrepreneurs from Stanford itself. And I knew maybe like one person before I started my startup, who was an entrepreneur, which was basically like my co-founder. right? So when people say that there's like a lot of entrepreneurship on campus, that means there are ways for you to like get more support for entrepreneurship on campus, but it's not essentially like oh like everyone's gonna be like starting their own company, because that's not like a model for society which works, right? Like obviously everyone cannot start a company. It's very good for you to start your own company, but it's not a good model for society for like everyone to start their own company and stuff like that. So that's what I'd say to that.
Okay,
Additionally though, yeah.
do you think that the fee hikes which are happening just in the recent years, like it's been compounding since a lot of years, but now, like as it's like getting really really expensive to get an education from bits, is
Mhm.
that might be a reason because of which a lot of people just think that I won't get a good return on investment if I just start up or something like that?
Yeah, so to be very controversial about that, I do not like the fee hikes that are happening. I think they're not a good idea at all. They're going to like reduce the quality of people on campus. But additionally, like it is, yeah, there is like a factor of like the ROI which you get on like, on the BIS education system and stuff like that. And if you're like, yeah, I think that's like a really good point to make as well. Like there's a lot of, I mean, for me, it's like way cheaper than it is for you guys, like how much you guys are paying. So I'd say like the entrepreneurship on campus might be, yeah, it's definitely affected by that. I'd say yeah, it's true.
Okay, that was my two questions for the day.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, big risks can be overwhelming. How do you personally manage that uncertainty and you still continue to do things?
Yeah, so well, I'd say for me, whenever I took a big risk, there's the worst that happened was that, I was like slowed down a little bit, or like I had to like think more about like what I have to do next to like figure things out. I've never experienced the risk where which like ended up bad for me. Like if you think about all the risks that I did, right? Like my first risk which I took was like obviously taking the drop year and like doing things other than like just JE. And like obviously I ended up at bits because I didn't study all the time, and people who get into IIT study all the time. But yeah, I still was able to like inform myself of, like actual research and stuff which happens, and like do cool things. So that was a risk, and even like dropping was a risk. And I'd say like like doing I don't know if like doing research was a risk, because there's like a lot of researchers out there. And there's like a lot of people who actually like do research out there. So the reality about like research is like you have like a bunch of different paths, right? Like one of the things you can do is like become a professor or something. And some people do think like being a people like being in research is like safe. So I wouldn't say that like that big of a risk. But doing the startup and stuff, like, you know, I'd say that was kind of a risk as well. But essentially, like one of the ways like I combat this uncertainty and like combat the fact that oh, I'm like really scared or something, is the fact that all the risks I've taken so far have ended up really good for me, or they've I made them in such a way that they've like ended up really good for me. But in addition to that, I should also be entirely honest in saying that I always had like a backup plan for like if any of my risks failed. For example, like for my drop year not working, I knew that with like minimal studying, like I didn't study that much in my like 11th and 12th. So I knew like with even with minimal studying, I'd probably still be able to like get into VIT again. I just want to like give it another shot, right? And for my startup, I still like had like a return offer from like my the company which I worked at, which was Intel. So I if my startup didn't work out, or if I didn't get into like Y Combinator or something, or if I didn't like find investment for my startup, I would. I mean, I shouldn't say like not get into Y Combinator, but if I didn't like find investment for my startup, right? Or if it so happened that I basically like didn't like have enough money to like support myself through the startup, there was still that like job which waited me, and I could just I could figure out like ways, or like to still keep like the idea going, and like find some way to like work for my startup. Like I could obviously like find customers or something and stuff like that. So I'd say like whatever risk I was taking, like, oh, by the way, I should say that before we got into YC, like looked out for like customers and stuff, so we could definitely like support ourselves for like a little bit. And I had like a year. I mean, I have like a year before I can like actually like start paying my loans. So I have like a year to like find investment, like find traction, find customers, etc., etc. So it does seem like a big risk in like the starting, like when you're thinking of it, but there's like ways you can like find backups and stuff like that, right?
Got it.
Yeah.
And since you are a tech founder with an extensive background in research, your
Hmm.
focus includes both leadership and management along with developing your product. So how do you balance these roles?
Yeah. So well, I think for the tech part, it's like very easy for me because I've written a lot of code in my life, and I continue to like write a lot of code in my life. For the business and the parts like that, I'd say my experience at Intel, where it's like actually like building products for like a separate team, which was not like that well versed with coding, that kind of like helped me like understand like to terms think of in terms of like how the customer thinks and stuff. And I feel like that was like a really good experience in like helping me understand like what exactly I could do and stuff like that, if that makes sense. So it kind of the balance I think of here is like I rely on my co-founder a lot for like the business insight she has, and she's like more of like a business person in startup. But at the same time, like when I'm writing code, I also like think about, oh, is this something which engineers would use, or like is this something like I was able to like learn those skills at Intel basically. But yeah.
Great.
Mhm.
And apart from technical expertise, has your research background helped you in any manner to fulfill your role as a leader at your startup?
Okay, so here's the answer to that question. In terms of like research expertise helping me towards my startup, I'd say like the biggest influence that the research has on my startup is like towards like discovering like new ways of doing things and like actually like implementing them. And I feel like that's like more that contributes like a lot more towards the technical side of things rather than like the leadership side of things, because most of the research which I do is like was just on my own and stuff like that. For like the actual like leadership things, I'd say surprisingly enough, like my club experience was like what actually like helped me contribute towards that. Um, so yeah, that's the answer to that question.
Yes. And we'll go to Stanford now. How's your life there?
Well, honestly, at Stanford, it's pretty good, I'd say. Like it's obviously like a lot less busy or like a lot less you know compared to my undergrad, like where I was staying in a dorm and stuff. It was like a lot less it's a lot less where I actually like go out and speak to people. It's mostly just me like working in my room or something. But I'd say like I really enjoy my time at Stanford. It's like really fun. I really liked like going to the classes here. The class here like really exciting, and I get to like meet like a lot of cool people, like both professors and students. And there's like a lot of opportunities here as well if you want to like do something. Probably, I mean, obviously more than bits, right? Like, but yeah, there's like a lot of opportunities to like do things here. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
And also, how does the curriculum and approach to
Mhm.
academics differ from BITS?
Yeah, so I'm doing grad school here. So it's most the curriculum is like mostly designed for like researchers. I mean, some of the curriculum is like designed for like researchers like actually like do research. So a lot more of the like courses here are like focus on projects and stuff, whereas like the courses at BITS are like focused more on like the actual like learning. So they have like a lot more tests. Um, but I'd say that's like the biggest difference. I do like a lot more like courses with like final projects rather than courses with tests at the end. So yeah, that's the biggest difference.
And do you see the same difference with your peers at Stanford?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the same. Like, but that's more like an undergraduate versus like grad school thing, because in grad school your GPA does not matter that much, and it's like not. I'd say like it's not hard to like maintain a high GPA in grad school. It's like very like all you have to do is just like unless like you're like a really lazy person or something who doesn't submit their homeworks, right? It's like very easy for you to like basically just like it's not hard to get an A at all. Just like do your homeworks, do a project. You should think of grad school as like a thing in which like you're doing your classes to like actually like like learn things and learn how things work in like a research environment, or like learn how things work in like a industry focused environment. So yeah.
Abhijit,
Yes.
what is your take on the competitiveness about in bits, like as you know that the courses are relatively graded, and do you
Yeah.
think that, it discourages the collaborative spirit of students? Because like as you are competing with your peers, it would just make you feel like less collaborative towards them.
Yeah. So I think personally speaking, I helped people as much as I could, like like in answering the questions and stuff. When they came to me with questions. I think people who do not help by through answering questions, or like do not help through like for example, like I mean, obviously, like during the COVID era, there's like a lot of like cheating and stuff, which I obviously do not support. But there are like other ways you can help, like which are like actually like positive, right? So the positive ways in which you can help is like before exams and stuff, like where you're like revising together or like solving questions together or something like that. That's like really good for you as well. As if you're like someone who's like studying really well, that's good for you as well, because when you answer those questions, your understanding of the topic improves. But yeah, I'd say for the collaborative environment, I'd say I'm not entirely sure about relative grading, because I never really like thought of my peers as people who I was like competing against, or I never really thought of them as like people who I was, I should not help because they would do better than me or something. I was always like happy when someone else like was able to like score a good score, especially like my friends, because that means that all of us are like improving together, right? And while it is true that like CGPA is like kind of important and stuff like that, relative grading is always going to be a thing. I don't think it's like going away anytime soon. The thing which would be worse is like if you had like really hard tests and you had like absolute grading, then you end up with people who have like a bunch of B's and then a bunch of C's and stuff, which is not like great. So I don't really have like an opinion on relative grading too much, because it's something which I didn't really think about. But if people are not helping each other because they are afraid of like getting worse grades and stuff, I think that's like a really shitty thing to do, and I don't think that's something which people should. I mean, I don't encourage it. That's what I'd say.
Okay, that answers my question. Aditi can go forward.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Arushi
Uh,
can go forward with the
Yeah,
questions.
just a second. Also, I think what Manas wanted to ask Abhijit was that not only competitiveness, but people's approach to academics over pursuing projects and all that.
Yeah.
So, because in BITS we have a very hard focus on academics to perform because our grading system
Right.
is so brutal. Do you think
Right.
like the lax grading in not lax, but the more accommodative grading in Stanford allows people to have more interests on the side?
Well, to be entirely honest with you, I don't think like the grading at bits is too harsh, unfortunately. Uh, yeah. So my opinion of the grading at bits is basically that people. I don't really think about like number of A's or like number of A minuses and stuff like that, because ultimately like you're gonna have like an average CGPA of your college. You're gonna like be based off of, and that's what like most grad schools do as well when you like apply for them. I would say though that most of the courses at bits probably do not require you to like study as much as you think. You just have to like know how to like do them. I wasn't even no like even though I had like a pretty high GPA, I wasn't spending that much time on my courses. I probably was spending at maximum like at Stanford, maybe I spent around like 15 hours per course, and we had like three courses here, right? So that's like a total of like 45 hours total. Um, I was spending like a very similar amount of time at bits as well, like where I was spending maybe like if you have like four or so courses, I forget how many courses we had per sem. Was it like six or something? But I remember like spending a similar amount of time per course at bits as I was spending at Stanford. So it's and I had like plenty of time left over after that as well to like just like hang out with friends, do like my research and do like projects and other stuff like that. So I'd say if you're not finding enough time to like do those things and you feel like your CGPA is slipping, it's a time management problem, and you need to like really look into like where you're spending your time. And that's kind of like controversial, but that's what I think. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's completely fine. Thank you for the answer. Arushi, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So, how is life outside of academics there?
At Stanford.
Yes.
So at Stanford, I'd say like life outside of academics is kind of like it's more challenging to have a social life at Stanford than at BITS. But that's mostly because like it's grad school and you don't like live in the same dorm. But at the same time, I have like made like a lot of close friends here, and I've like traveled a bunch and stuff like that. You hard like reach out to people more here than because you can't just like go to a mess. Everyone's like eating on like some people eat at the dining halls, but I just like cook all of my own food. So it's more challenging to like have like a good social life here, but it's not that hard. And I think you have to like reach out to people a lot more here. But other than that, though, I'd say like I met great people at Bits. I met great people at Stanford, so it's essentially the same thing. Um, and there's like a lot of fun things you can do at Stanford. Like I did mountain climbing, I did mountain biking. I There's like a kayaking course, which I was thinking of taking, but unfortunately I couldn't. There's like obviously a gym and stuff which people go to. Uh, there's also like a lot of fun events that happen all the time. So yeah, it's pretty fun being here. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
That's really nice. And looking back, what has surprised you the most about higher studies path compared to the placement part?
Yeah, so about the placement part, I can't like think about. I mean, I can't talk about it much, and I guess like I'm just really glad I'm not working corporate. Uh, but about the higher studies part, I'd say like I expected that it'd be a lot more hectic than it was actually. Like I thought that you'd be like spending all of your time like just because I heard before I got into Stanford, right? Like I heard from like one of our Stanford seniors that you not have any time to like do things outside of your academics. But again, I think honestly, like when people say that, like I don't have enough time to do stuff, it just boils down into like a time management issue, right? So you need to like manage your time well and like do things well. Because funny thing, like I sometimes make nonsense stuff, and like people tell me, "Oh, how do you have like so much time on your hands?" And I say it only takes me 30 minutes. What are you saying, right? So I'd say fundamentally, it's like it's it. I'd say that people told me it would be a lot more hectic than I was. It is actually. So that's like the biggest surprise. But yeah,
Uh, and is there anything you wish you knew before you were embarking on the masters?
well, I'd say one of the things is first thing maybe book your flight tickets in advance because you can get like, so yeah, book your flight tickets in advance is like the biggest advice I would give myself. Other than that, I'd say like do whatever, because it's not gonna matter that much in the long run. Figure out your journey for yourself. So yeah, that's the advice I'd give people.
Right. And you're the co-founder of a Y Combinator funded startup Godela. Can you give us a glimpse about what it is?
Yeah. So my startup is basically like it's trying to like be like obviously like ChatGPT and like such things like that have like improved the efficiency of like knowledge workers and people who like write code and stuff like that. But for scientists, right? There's like not really like obviously if you reach out like chat if you like type something in ChatGPT, it's gonna give you like a bunch of different things which you can do as a scientist. But there's like no exact like there's no new physics learning or like no actual research driven like or like there's nothing actually out there which can like do research for you, right? So essentially like what we're building right now is like something which uses physics informed ML and methods like that to like compress every equation into like a latent space, and then once you have like the latent space, like the physics in the latent space, you can like discover like new physics out of it, right? So essentially like imagine you were to like ask a question like how does changing the angle of attack or like how does like changing the thickness of my airfoil affect X and Y thing. So when you ask that sort of like research question, right, you would first like formulate this entire like research methodology of like like doing a parameter sweep and stuff like that, and then you'd actually like uh build out your entire research, and then you do your research, and then you do analysis of your research. If you could like entirely like use some sort of like artificial intelligence like build that out, then if you think about like what artificial general intelligence is, right, or AGI as they call it, it's basically like trying to like answer questions in a way that like it's end to end, and it's in a way that like it can be like it's actually like doing the reasoning or like basing stuff off of like actual scientific you know qualities or like properties. So we are trying to like build something that can accelerate like research by doing the research for you. And the way we are doing that is like through three levels. Level zero is like where we build the physics informed models. Level one is like where we have like the actual physics learning from latent space. And level two is like the application layer, which you actually like use to like interact with your with the model and like actually like get research driven insights. So yeah, that's what our startup does.
So the idea is to accelerate how research works, or is there anything else?
Yeah, so it's like to accelerate research in like for almost like any industry, but we're like focusing on like engineering right now. I mean, when you say anything else, right? Like even accelerating research and like it's basically like if you had like an AI researcher, right, or if you had like a researcher who was able to like inform you of like your questions and stuff. There, one way to do it would be like through an agent and like using current tools and stuff, but that's not like a good way because you're not like this. Like it's very difficult for like an LLM to like discover new physics by just like looking at the analysis of like results. If there was some way like in which you could like embed these physics into like some other space where you're like actually like learning things, like or learning like new relationships from your data, then it's going to like actually like you're enjoying R&D process by like a lot, right? So that's what our startup does, which it helps you
Understood.
like accelerate the R&D process. So yeah.
And can you explain the shift that comes from transforming the academic research into functioning services and products?
Yeah. So one thing I'd say, which we're focusing on a lot right now is like the commercialization ability of it, right? Because when you're doing like a research uh thing, like you don't really think about like whether research can be useful or what can it can be used for. You're basically like doing, and this is like one of my gripes with the PhD as well. Like a lot of the PhD research which goes into things is just like solving problems for like whoever your contractor is. Like there's like NSF grants out there, there's like DOE or DOD grants out there which you get, and then you like solve a specific problem, and then no one ever like uses it again. But with entrepreneurship, you're like trying to solve an actual problem which like a lot of people have and a lot of people pay for, and it's not like an infinite budget, which a lot of government contracts tend to have, right? So that's essentially like what I'd say would be the difference between research and like entrepreneurship. You're trying to like solve a problem in a way that's like resource efficient and also like solves a lot of people's problems at once. Yeah.
And can you give insights on how this approach is different to research workflow a little bit in detail?
So with research, I mean, I kind of like do it in the same way, like even because we are still in the R&D phase of a startup, like we're trying to build out our models and stuff. So I kind of do it in the same way of like, testing out whether like model works and like, you know, logging everything and seeing like whether my model gives like good accurate results and stuff like that. But in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about like, is my research actually like benefiting the end customer? The end customer we're like trying to seek out is like obviously like enterprise customers who have like a lot of R&D, the costs, and you're trying to like reduce the R&D costs for them by making it so that they don't have to expend as much. Um, so this is kind of like an approach which I don't find it that alien in compared to like what I do for my actual research. It's just that there's an additional factor of like, oh, who am I building this for? Who am I like actually like, who are my customers? Who pay for this? How much resource am I using, etc., etc. So yeah.
Got it. And what has been the most challenging thing as a co-founder, and what is something that came to you naturally?
Yeah, so the most challenging thing for me as a co-founder has been like, keeping in mind that I'm like actually like trying to build something for a customer and not like, building something for myself. Because there are, but I should like probably elaborate a little bit more on that. When I say that, right? I think of like building things for myself as like, how can I explain this to myself? And there's like a level of like expertise which I have, like which makes things which are somewhat complicated or like something or things which are like somewhat difficult to understand very easy for me to understand. So when I explain something to someone, I kind of tend to like speak at a higher level than necessary. And that's like learning to speak at a lower level or like not a lower level, but like at a more layman level, right? It's been somewhat challenging to like default to that when I speak to someone for the first time rather than to speak at like go into like depth about like how my methodology works and stuff like that. Um, what has come to me naturally is obviously like writing code, like actually like building the product and stuff like that because I really enjoy building things and I really enjoy experimenting with things. And essentially like a startup is basically an experiment where you're trying to see like what works and what doesn't. So that's been like really fun and I really enjoy that. Like honestly, like I work weekends right now, but I don't even feel like I work weekends. So that's how enjoyable it is for me. So yeah.
That is great. And
Abhijit, uh,
Yeah.
so, like 5 years ago, you were like a second year student at BITS, just getting started with his second year, first sem. And
Hmm.
now, skip forward the 5 years, you are like a co founder, did your master's from Stanford and all.
Hmm.
Where do you see yourself after 5 years from now? Now, like, what
Yeah.
do you think that you'd be doing?
So hopefully I'll still be working on my current startup. Uh, and the startup would have found like good product market fit and we may have raised like a couple more funding rounds and we'd have like a bunch of enterprise clients and stuff like that. In addition to that, I hope that I can, like live a life of, where I mean I'm kind of like already living this life of like adventure where I'm like doing things which are kind of unconventional or like traveling a lot and stuff like that. But I just want to like not miss like, you know, I don't want to like get rid of my ability to take risks too much. And there's this thing called founder mode, right? Like where you're able to just work on problems and like work on solving problems and stuff like that. So I hope I continue doing the same thing. So yeah.
Okay. And Abhijit, what are your, non-professional, non-academic, non-startup related goals in life? Like, a lot of people want to travel the world when, when they
Yeah.
are working. So, what does, Abhijit want to do when you're like not specifically actively working?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. One thing would be obviously like to maintain my health and stuff. Like so that I can live like a long, healthy life. And the way I do that is through like eating healthy, working out, like going on a lot of hikes, taking care of my mental health, etc., etc. So if you're asking about like specific non-work related goals, I do play like a lot of competitive Pokemon, and I'm trying to get better at that. And I also play the guitar, so I'm trying to get better at that as well. But yeah, those honestly like take a back seat sometimes. But yeah, that's those like my like health, getting better at competitive Pokemon, getting better at guitar, and obviously like taking care of like people who are around me and like maintaining close relationship with people who are like meeting cool people, etc., etc. So those are my goals. So yeah.
Mhm. And
How would
I
you
would
say how would you say is the competitive Pokemon scene in Stanford?
like.
It's terrible. There's almost no one who plays it. Yeah, I met maybe one other person who plays it. I'm having to unfortunately like rely on like online tournaments to like keep myself going. There's a friend of mine who went to Berkeley, Mahit. Oh, he's like a really great guy as well. Like, he's been like super supportive. Mahit Tunuguntla. He went to Berkeley. He's an amazing person. So I used to like play competitive Pokemon with him a little bit, but then like I basically just like play online tournaments because the scene here is like terrible for that. But yeah.
Makes sense, makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And Abhijit, what are your content consumption habits? Like, do you listen to podcasts, or do you like read books, or do you just chill out and watch web series, or like what do you do in that case?
So I mostly just read books honestly. I read books. I guess like I do watch anime, but it's like only on my lunch breaks. Like I maybe like pick out a series. There's like this anime club at like Stanford as well, like where they meet up like every Friday night and then they just like talk about it. Uh, so it's basically just like I either do it. I watch anime on my lunch breaks and I guess like I just read books whenever I get the time. Unfortunately, like I've not been doing either of those things because obviously startup is like hectic. But yeah, that's what I do.
Mm-hmm. So, what's your favorite book then?
My favorite book would probably have to be this book called Miyamoto, like Musashi. It's by
Oh,
Eiji
Miyamoto
Yoshikawa.
Musashi, you mean?
What?
Miyamoto Musashi, right?
Yeah, it's about Miyamoto Musashi, but the book is called Musashi. It's by Eiji Yoshikawa, I think, and it's about like this life of like a Ronin and how he like travel across the world. I mean, not the world, but like across Japan, challenging like a bunch of people and like trying to become the strongest. But then he realizes that at the end of the book, that becoming the strongest is not what's most important. It's like being kind, right? So it's like a really fun book to read. It's kind of long, but I highly recommend like almost everyone read it. But yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I would like to, ask Arushi to go forward with the next questions.
Yeah. So you co-founded your physics optimization startup with a Stanford batchmate. What
Yeah.
qualities or shared values do you prioritize while teaming up?
Yeah, so I'd say my co-founder and I like get along very well, right? Like she's like a really nice person and she's like very kind. But at the same time, we also have like the same, communication style of like being very direct with each other. And we never have any like hurt feelings when we have like something to convey. There have been some people in my who have been friends with me who unfortunately I have like kind of censored myself with a little bit. But I'd say like one great thing is that I don't have to worry about with my co-founder is that I can tell her basically like anything I'm thinking, and then she would be like she would understand like where I'm coming from and like be responsive with that. In addition to that, I'd say like find someone who's like an actually good person. Like they should not try to like screw you over like at every opportunity. I really lucked out with my co-founder there because like she's like the kindest person you'll ever meet. But at the same time, she's also like very competent in like what she does, and like what she's obviously has like great credentials as well. She worked as like a Apple product design engineer, and she worked as a Google PM, and she had like a startup before this. So it's been and she's obviously from Stanford, so she has great credentials. But I'd say the two most important things are: first thing, make sure you have communication with them is great, and the other thing is make sure that they're a good person. So yeah.
And if you had to start another venture today, what would you choose?
I mean, honestly, nothing because I wanted to do this.
You'd want to do this for the
Yeah,
rest of your
exactly.
life?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously like the fact that I want to like go out and like visit exoplanets and stuff. So there's like a bunch of things which I have to do to get there, right? Like first thing I have to build is like an asteroid mining company because the resources on Earth are like clearly not enough. So once I build that asteroid mining company, I'll work on like building this kind of like Dyson's. I mean, this is all like very silly, but it's what I think, right? Like I kind of want to like build a Dyson swarm around the sun, and then post that like get to the actual like faster and light travel stuff. But yeah, that's what I think.
That is great.
Yeah.
I'm done with my questions.
Yeah, so we're done with the questions. Is there anything else you would like to talk about, Abhijit?
Yeah. So if anything, if the only thing you take away from this entire talk is the fact that you should take bigger risks and you should be a little bit more fearless with your life. That's what I like to leave you with. Because like essentially like everyone is like a lot more scared than they need to be. There's like a lot of like if you zoom in on your life like every single day, there's probably people who are like listening to this who are like worried about the GPA. There's people who are like worried about like the friendships. There's people who are like worried about a bunch of different things. There's probably stuff in your family that you're worried about. There are things which you might be dealing with mentally, or like things which you might be like dealing with in terms of your like, oh, should I do X thing or like Y thing. All of these, when you zoom out a little bit, right, all of these become like somewhat inconsequential, and they're not like things which like affect your life. I mean, some of them obviously do affect your life in like a big way, but most of the things that you're worried about today are things which are not that big of a deal. And you should probably have like a lot more confidence in yourself and a lot more like feeling in yourself that you can like deal with any problem that comes up with whatever you decide to do. So to everyone, there's probably a bunch of people who are listening to this who have like bad CGs, and they're like, oh, how do I improve my CG, and how do I like like how do I actually like get to the places where I want to be? It's like too late for me. One thing I didn't mention is like I started off with like a 7.62 GPA and I ended up with a 9.28. Okay. So once you figure stuff out, it's not gonna be hard at all. So just believe in yourself a lot more. Just be a little bit more fearless. Take wise risks, obviously. Like, don't do crazy things like jumping off roofs or something. But yeah, so that's what I'd say. That's the biggest thing that you should take away from this entire conversation.
That's great. That's great, Abhijit.